This injury is unrelated
Oh.
to any of what you've been describing.
Oh,
So
oh my God. Wolff is hurting his career that is actually already affecting his pocketbook.
None of your typical days have involved forensic pathology, have they?
Oh.
You haven't acted as a physician.
I'm sorry, only a lawyer I think can appreciate. This stuff is so dense. Let me break it down for you folks and why I am laughing so hysterically that I have tears in my eyes. Well, hello everybody, and welcome back to Buckle Up, It's the Law with attorney Larry Foreman. Folks, today we are going to cover Dr. Wolff, neurosurgeon. And before we dive into his testimony and the analysis of both the direct, we got about 10 minutes of direct with Brennan and then 5 minutes of cross with Alessi. That's going to be the really fun part, so stay tuned. But before we get into it, folks, I want to tell you something very unusual happened. I don't think this has ever happened to me in my entire YouTube career, and I imagine this is not the last time that this is going to happen. First and foremost, we have discovered that Shanon Burgess was recruited by Hyde. Remember her? Dr. Jekyll and Ms. Hyde? She made a post on Twitter in 2022, and he replied. He answered the call. It's all interconnected, folks. They all know each other. They're all part of the same lying ecosystem. If you don't know what I'm talking about, hopefully my editor will have by now flashed it on the screen. The second thing is one of Dr. Wolff's soon-to-be former patients reached out to me. Apparently, he's a neurosurgeon in Miami. In order to protect their identity, we're gonna call them Jane Doe. Could be a man, could be a woman, it doesn't matter. So Jane Doe has had a procedure scheduled with this doctor over the next few months. Here's what they had to say. Dr. Wolff is, all caps, my neurosurgeon. Oh, really? Well, how do you feel about him? They reply, I was in shock when I saw that it was him. I had a procedure scheduled. He is the director of a Miami center where I was scheduled for a procedure. I'm not going to go into too much detail because, again, I don't want to divulge the identity of the soon-to-be former patient. Here it is. I did not get a good impression from Dr. Wolff. Not so nice and somewhat gruff bedside manner. I have been contemplating postponing him, and then I saw his testimony on Wednesday. I have been following the Karen Reed trial very closely. Get this, in their own words. For Dr. Wolff to say that John O'Keefe's injuries were from hitting his head on the flat ground is ... crazy. Obviously, he was paid to say that. Not my words. So I say, well, are you having second thoughts about having Dr. Wolff as your doctor now after what you saw in the Karen Reed trial? Well, they reply, I think he was dishonest. And that kind of pushed me over the edge, and I'm going to find a new doctor for my treatment. I ask, like, was it the trial that really solidified your desire to get a new doctor? And they said, well, the truth is, I was put off before the trial by Dr. Wolff and his demeanor, his mannerisms, etc. But seeing that testimony in the Karen Reed trial with the death of John O'Keefe cemented my desire in getting a new doctor. Wow. Folks, you can't make this stuff up. A lot of these experts that are being, liars for hire, as I like to call them, because they will say whatever you want, just pay them. I don't know how much, based on what I'm seeing, at least with this one soon-to-be former patient, I am not here to try and trample over a man's career. He's trampling over his career himself. I don't need to help him in any way. I'm just a reporter. I'm acting in a reporter capacity / attorney commentator. It is unbelievable to think about the fact that they were already unimpressed with him, And now this Jane Doe character is going to go out and get a new doctor because of the testimony. I have never seen this before in my life, folks. That's impressive. That's impressive. This is how much Wolff is hurting his career, that is actually already actively affecting his pocketbook. His amount of patients may dwindle. Those who are at least following the trial and those who talk and listen. There's some people that are just going to go, I don't care. He's my neurosurgeon and I trust him. And that's fine. I don't care. Like, let him do his business. I'm not trying to ruin a man's career. Like I said, he did it to himself. I don't need to help him. So without further ado, let's dive into the testimony, shall we?
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury, spell your first name and last name for the court reporter?
Sure. My first name is Isaac, A-I-Z-I-K. It's phonetic. Last name is Wolff, W-O-L-F, like the real thing.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a brain surgeon.
Is there a special part of medicine that you study?
My main interest in brain surgery is brain tumors and trigeminal neuralgia, but I also specialize in movement disorders. I do pediatrics and adults.
Were you asked to review materials relative to this case?
Yes.
And do you recall the materials that you reviewed? Could you share with us some of the materials that you reviewed?
I reviewed the chief medical examiner's assessment of the case. I reviewed pictures that I'm assuming the medical examiner of the autopsy, and I reviewed the report from the forensic pathologist.
Did you have an opportunity to review photographs of a laceration to Mr. John O'Keefe's head?
Yes, I did.
With the court's permission, I'm going to ask to display Exhibit 160. Okay. What you're seeing here, and take us through the process of your observations.
Well, what we're seeing is an approximate 1.5 inch laceration with bridging tissue and contusions and abrasions. To us, that's just a classic blunt trauma injury. There's nothing other than just vanilla about it. This is what happens when soft tissue hits a solid ground. The skin tears apart a bit, but not through and through. As you can see, there's the bridging. You can see all the bruising or contusions and just the tear, a little bit serrated along the edges.
Dr. Wolff, as a result of that wound, did you have a chance to further look at information provided to you about the actual inside, the skull of Mr. John O'Keefe?
Yes, it was the pictures that I was reviewing showed a non-depressed skull fracture extending linearly through the clivus.
Hold on a second. Did he ever examine the body? That's my question, because from pictures, sure, maybe he can, without lying, say, yeah, it looks like he hit the ground. But if he had examined the body and the multiple, I'm sure he's got like multiple bumps on his head. John O'Keefe does, because he has been hit on the head repeatedly. That's why, you know, and the blood was running down this way, not out this way, which means he was not laying on the ground. He was upright. He was standing upright when the assault by the Alberts happened in the Alberts' home. Let's keep listening. I don't trust this guy at all.
And into the frontal fossa of Mr. O'Keefe over the orbital roofs. He had fractures along the temporal fossa as well. So it was a classic linear basilar skull fracture.
So can you walk us through what happens when someone incurs this type of injury to the back of the head, how it happens, and what are the next steps for a person?
So what happens is, you know, you fall backwards, and the linear acceleration starts to take you back down with gravity. The skull hits the ground. It gets, you know, in layman's terms, smashed a little bit. And then the brain moves forward as a response to that. And it moves forward because you have cerebrospinal fluid and because you have the deceleration, acceleration again. As it does, your skull, if you were to look inside your skull, it's like mini mountains along your temporal bones and your frontal bones. The brain is being thrust forward at a fairly good speed, and it's getting bruised. You can think of it as if you took a hammer to your thumb. It's really turning black and blue. Those are the contusions. And so the temporal poles and the frontal poles are getting contusions because of that.
I want to take a step back at the beginning. You said that this laceration on the back of his head was caused by a fall. Could this be caused by a fall landing on hard ground?
Yes, like I said, it's a classic blunt trauma laceration.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Okay, hold on. Blunt trauma could also be a strike from a fist, a hammer, a board. I don't know. Think of an object. So that still holds true. So his testimony is not entirely inaccurate. Blunt force trauma to the head is just the source he's wrong about.
Whether this injury, the laceration and the basal fracture, was caused by Mr. O'Keefe falling backwards on the ground.
My opinion is that that's what caused his whole injury.
The pattern of the laceration, do you have an opinion whether that is consistent with hitting the cold, hard ground?
Objection, Your Honor. Can we have sidebar on that, please? So I'm sustaining the objection, so no sidebar.
Do you have an opinion, doctor, about whether that laceration on the back of his head was caused by a particular movement?
Well, the only way he could get this kind of an injury was to fall backwards, hit the back of his head.
That's
and
not
then the
true.
resulting...
Right there, that is false. There are multiple ways to get a contusion like that. That's not the only way, and he knows it.
You know, energy forces going into his brain, into his base of his skull.
If a person does not have functional abilities because they are rendered unconscious, does their body, could it still move?
Yes, this is the interesting thing about our brain. So the cortex, which is the top portion of your brain, gets separated from your brainstem functionally. And what happens then is that your body is not acting autonomically, meaning vegetative. So why does that happen? We think it's because as we were a caveman, and if a caveman became unconscious, as an animal came up to eat it, the animal would touch it. Well, you have these automatic movements. One of them is called decorticating, which is where you draw your arms like this and you throw your feet out. And then a worse neurological situation is when you decerebrate. Now you push your arms out along with your legs. And that would scare off an animal. So we think that over time, genetically, this is what happened to our brains in order to create these. But those kind of movements are not thought processes. In other words, your brain is not telling you, oh, you have pain, go ahead and decorticate or decerebrate. It's an automatic movement in response to pain.
I want you to take us back now to after the fall.
Okay.
Would Mr. O'Keefe...
I think he just wanted to show us how smart he is in that, because I'm like, what does that have to do? Cavemen? Dude, and I love learning about science and history and our ancient history. Don't get me wrong, I'm usually fascinated, but this was so out of left field. I'm like, what does that have to do with anything? What are you even talking about, dude? Like, okay, congratulations, you're really, really, really smart. Do you want a cookie?
Your study and opinion have died immediately.
No. There is very few things that you head injury where you would die, quote, immediately. So if I took a knife and stabbed you in the back of your neck right below your skull, and I drove it through your brainstem, you would probably die immediately. If I shot you below your ear and went through and through below your ear and shot through your brainstem, you would die immediately. But traumatic head injuries, you would not die immediately. It's a process. And it's a process of a combination of things. Brain swelling, which takes a while to develop, decreased blood flow to your brain because you're getting swelling, and ultimately death of the brainstem that controls your heart and your breathing. And so this is why there's a whole big issue about brain death. You know, when is someone brain dead? Because it's not instant and it can take a long time to be conceived.
Dr. Wolf, could you share with us what you see here in this picture?
So right here you can see the black and blue that sort of configures, if he had his eyes open, like what we describe as raccoon's eyes, right? And that's not caused by direct trauma to his eyelids. It's caused by what I described as the basilar skull fracture, which went to the anterior fossa, which is right over the orbit here, inside with leakage of blood products into that periorbital area.
You mentioned that starts or takes at least 1 to 3 hours to begin?
Minimally, yes.
If Mr. O'Keefe had been brought to a trauma center or emergency room, what would the process be in your experience?
Well, he would have been intubated if he wasn't intubated in the field. One of the first things you need to do in a head injury is control the airway. Why? Two reasons. One, you want to have enough oxygen going to the brain to feed it down, because that causes increased intracranial pressure if it elevates. So you want to constrict the blood vessels a little bit. Then he would have had a CT scan immediately in order to assess whether he has a surgical head injury, meaning he needs to go to the operating room to evacuate something, or not. During that process, he's obviously going to be getting medication to decrease the brain swelling. And from there, you make decisions based on his neurological function and what you're, capable of doing to, spare the brain from the rest of the injuries that will result.
Did you review any materials that talked about or identified Mr. O'Keefe's body temperature when he was treated?
As I recall, his core temperature was 80 when he was found.
Is that significant in the process and development of his injury from the moment he fell and hit his head until his ultimate passing?
Well,
I love how since Brennan can't ask Wolff, he sustained this injury from falling backwards and hitting his head. He's like, so when he fell backwards and hit his head, would you? It's like it's so stupid. It's so stupid. I wish I could see the jurors' faces right now.
hypothermia, if you define hypothermia, it starts at 95 degrees. Your core temperature is usually about 98, 98.6. 95 is very mild hypothermia. When you get to 82 degrees, you're in severe hypothermia.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty whether Mr. O'Keefe died immediately or within 15 minutes?
No, I don't think he died immediately. Neither the hypothermia nor this kind of head injury would kill you immediately in any clinical experience I have.
We've had the pleasure of meeting. Welcome.
Thank you.
Sir, can you just describe, you started to do it a little bit on direct, a typical day for you?
I wake up at 4:15 in the morning. I go to my center. I set up patients with frames for their either radiosurgical procedures or stereotactic craniotomies. I go home. I make cappuccino for my wife at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then I get back to work at 6:30 and move on. I have patients that I'm operating on, and I have patients that I'm seeing through the day.
And what type of patients and what type of work? Just in a typical day. What are you doing? What type of patients and what do you do?
It varies. I see patients with brain tumors. I see patients with hydrocephalus, which is water in their brain. I see pediatric brain tumors. I see subacute and chronic subdural hematomas, post-traumatic. I see patients with strokes that are being misdiagnosed. I see patients with cancer, metastatic disease. I used to see patients with cervical problems. I stopped doing that 2 years ago. I don't know what else you want me to tell you.
No, that's great. And is that typical day, typical of the type of days you've had for the past month, past few years? Is it generally, without specifics, is it generally?
Correct.
So none of your typical days, none of the past typical months have involved forensic pathology, have they?
Oh.
You haven't acted as a forensic pathologist.
Oh, look at that smile. Look at that laugh. I was waiting for it. It's like, what's a typical day for you? Tell me about What is forensic pathology? Forensics has to do with essentially the legal system. Anytime you hear forensic science or like forensic examination, forensic pathology, forensic neuroscience, whatever, that always means in the context of the legal system, okay? And the reason he laughed so hard is twofold. Here's what's about to happen. He's about to say, well, first of all, I don't need to be a criminal, investigator for my profession to determine what a brain injury is, sir, right? He's going to get snarky probably with Alessi. But most importantly, Alessi is calling him out because he's like, look, you have all this knowledge, but it's not your field of expertise to look at it in a criminal setting. You see? So let's see how that smile and laugh were both so telling immediately that he's like, oh, come on, seriously? But he may be walking into a trap Let's see how Alessi handles him. And let's see what Dr. Wolf has to say in response to, you don't have any experience in forensic pathology, do you? Because that's not your field, as Alessi just asked.
I am, if you could have asked that question, very straightforward. I am not a forensic pathologist. I'm a brain surgeon.
Right. And you don't perform autopsies, correct, sir? You're a brain surgeon.
Correct. In other words, I see more brains than the forensic pathologist.
Right. And
That doesn't matter.
is it correct to say that the brains that you see are of living people?
Correct.
Okay. So what I'd like to do is to go to a different part of the head than was discussed, but sticking with the decedent.
Excuse me, I didn't hear the last
I'm
one.
sorry, the topic is going to be Mr. O'Keefe, the decedent in this
Okay.
matter, sir. You testified about raccoon eyes. The medical term for that, sir, is ecchymosis, right?
Correct.
And ecchymosis, raccoon eyes, does not cause a laceration to form on an eyelid, does it?
No.
Are you aware that Mr. O'Keefe had a laceration to the outside area of his right upper eyelid?
I am aware that the ME described that. Yes, sir.
Now,
Independent medical examiner, IME.
could Your Honor, I'm going to, with Your Honor's permission, ask to publish what is already in evidence in a moment.
Okay.
Dr. Wolf, have you seen this photo depiction before today?
I believe I have.
Is it correct that that injury on the upper right eyelid is caused by the application of force directly to
Yes.
that area of the front of the head, again, namely the upper eyelid?
That's possible, yes.
Oh!
Is it more than possible? Is it probable that that injury was caused by the application of force directly to that area of the front of his head?
Well, an easy answer to that would be is that that's not part of the periorbital ecchymosis.
Thank you, sir. That was exactly going to be my next question. This injury is unrelated to any of what you've been describing.
Oh!
The fall
Oh, my
backwards,
God!
The force transfer inside the skull, the, as you described it, the dura, the cerebral spinal fluid, all of that dynamic that you so ably described on your direct examination. This injury has nothing to do with that, correct?
Correct.
Thank you for answering my questions, Dr. Wolf. A pleasure again. No more questions at this time.
I'm sorry. Only a lawyer, I think, can appreciate this stuff is so dense. Let me break it down for you, folks, and why I am laughing so hysterically that I have tears in my eyes. You're like, Larry has completely lost it. Larry has lost his mind. He is not. No, you don't understand what just happened. Let me explain it to you. For those of you, it's extremely confusing, and I completely understand if you're confused. Let me explain. So Dr. Wolf, for the duration of like an hour and a half, has basically been describing, like, look, this is how John O'Keefe died. He fell, hit his head, and that's it. That's it, right? Straightforward, easy, no hay problema, right? No problems. And then Alessi gets up there and he goes, okay, so let's assume, standing, fell backwards. But then he also has another injury. And you were aware of it. Yes, I was. And it's a laceration on his eye, which is completely, it's not possible to fall backwards and then also be like, oh, and, get cut in the eye. Absolutely, that is correct. Thank you, no further questions. I know that's not exactly how it went down, but that's your TLDR right there. You see, that's why I was laughing so hard, because all it took was one fact. He doesn't even need to go into the whole, it doesn't make any sense, and blah, blah, blah. One extra fact that they have that is part of the autopsy report, the laceration from the front. If you get injured in the back, how can you also get injured in the front unless you're like, pinballing around, which obviously it's so ridiculous. He was in a fight. And Dr. Wolf knows it. He's just trying to cover for Brennan because he got paid to say what he got paid to say. Oh God, folks, this was amazing. No wonder this guy's going to start losing patience now. He already has lost one. as a result of this, and I'm sure they're not alone. And he did it to himself. I'm not helping him. He is helping himself to this. So, folks, I hope you all learned something. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I am in stitches. I am in stitches. That was amazing. That was incredible. Alessi is a beast. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye, everybody.